One still autumn afternoon, a 70-year-old black man cruised along to his daughter's home to celebrate his granddaughter's birthday. Out of nowhere, two white police officers pulled him over without explanation. What began as a standard traffic stop spiraled into a series of humiliating events. He was taken to the precinct until the police chief, who just so happened to be his daughter, walked in. Everything shifted in that moment. Those officers were about to reckon with their actions. But before we dive into the full story, have you ever been judged just by your appearance? Drop your thoughts below. The golden late-day sun drenched the winding backroads of South Atlanta, laying long, lazy shadows across cracked asphalt lined with trees dressed in fading autumn glory. Crimson, amber, and ochre leaves floated down like slow-moving confetti as Henry Carter steered his old teal Buick around the familiar bends. At 70, he didn't drive slowly because he had to, he did it because he liked to. He believed in life unfolding at its own rhythm. The soft hum of Miles Davis's Blue in Green curled through the car, filling the air with jazz that made silence feel profound. In the passenger seat rested a small box, wrapped in blue paper, ribbon a little frayed. Inside, a delicate porcelain tea set, chosen with care for his 7-year-old granddaughter, Ava. Today was her birthday. He was headed to his daughter's house. No, her sanctuary, Alicia Carter, 42, the youngest and first black woman to lead the city's police force. Some still did double takes when she walked in, tall, poised, commanding, with a gaze that didn't waver. Boardrooms, crime scenes, press conferences, none of it shook her. Henry had seen this future in her eyes since she was a child, when she challenged teachers, ran for student council in a school where she stood alone, then joined the academy and refused to break. She'd married Marcus, an engineer and history nerd who loved fixing clocks and teaching Ava about both Harriet Tubman and the moon landing. Together, they built a life rooted in knowledge, justice, and weekend pancake breakfasts. Their home sat on a peaceful street of white fences and front porch swings, where neighbors waved and dogs barked politely. It was a far cry from Henry's world growing up, but it was the future he had fought to give his children. As he drove, he smiled softly, remembering Ava's last birthday, how she'd seated him at a miniature table in the yard, crowned him with paper, and poured invisible tea. "It's real if you believe it, Grandpa," she had said, with the kind of sincerity only children carry. And Henry had believed. The Buick's low engine murmured as he turned onto Maple Ridge Drive. He could already hear the laughter, see Alicia in her apron with flour smudged on her cheek, pretending she hadn't bought the cake from the bakery. Today was about family. In the rearview mirror, he noticed the patrol car. It had been trailing him for 2 turns now, a quiet stalker, a shadow. Still, Henry didn't panic. He never had reason to worry, but a knot still tightened in his gut. He wasn't speeding. His tags were current. The old Buick might have looked like a relic from another time, but it ran smooth, clean. Henry kept both hands firmly on the wheel, tapping the brake with gentle control. Then, out of nowhere, red and blue lights exploded behind him, cutting across the peaceful afternoon like sirens echoing through a sanctuary. He pulled over without hesitation, every move intentional. The window was already lowered before they reached him. He turned down the jazz. His hands stayed visible, open, calm, steady. A soft wind slipped through the window and grazed the back of his neck. He sat a little taller. He'd taken this drive 100 times before, but this time would not end the way it always had. Today would stir something long buried, something ancient and still alive, not just in him, but in the very system his daughter had been battling for years. The cruiser door slammed shut with a thud, sharp and final, like a gavel or a period in a sentence no one wanted to hear. The first officer approached, a young white man, early 30s at most, walking with the hollow confidence of someone used to commanding respect he hadn't earned. His badge read Grady. Behind him stood another officer, bulkier, bald, wearing mirrored sunglasses like armor. His arms were crossed, eyes scanning the surroundings like danger might crawl out from the hedges. The name on his tag, Miles. Grady leaned into the window, skipping any greeting. License and registration. Henry gave a slow, respectful nod. His voice was quiet, clear, composed. "Officer, may I reach into the glove compartment?" Grady didn't answer right away. He just stared, as if translating Henry's words through suspicion. Finally, he gave a tight, irritated nod. Henry moved with purpose, slow and precise, opening the glove box, retrieving the familiar folder with his license already inside. He handed it over, gaze steady. There was no fear in his eyes, but no defiance either. Only quiet dignity, the kind you don't have to explain. Grady examined the documents with a scrutiny designed to find something wrong. He clicked his tongue. "You live in Old Pine?" he asked, naming the predominantly black, working-class neighborhood across town. "I did," Henry replied evenly. "For 40 years. My daughter bought a home up here. I'm headed there now." Grady raised an eyebrow. "Driving this?" He waved a hand dismissively toward the Buick, like it was scrap metal rather than a car that had served longer than he'd been alive. Henry let the jab pass. Life had taught him when a man asked a question without wanting an answer. From the cruiser, Officer Miles called out, "You've been through here before, haven't you? Know someone in this neighborhood?" Henry turned slightly, steadying his voice, trying to keep the moment from tipping into something uglier. "I've been through many neighborhoods, officer. But yes, my daughter lives just a few blocks ahead." Miles scoffed. "What's her address?" Henry gave it. Grady jotted it down like he was waiting to catch a lie. "You got any packages in the trunk?" Miles asked. "Delivering for someone? Amazon, maybe." Henry blinked once. "No, sir. Just a birthday gift. For my granddaughter." Grady handed back his documents with a flick of the wrist, dismissive, careless, then stepped to the side, murmuring into the mic on his shoulder. Henry couldn't catch the words, but he knew the cadence. A check, a stall, a delay dressed up as procedure. Miles stepped forward, no longer leaning back. "Mind stepping out of the vehicle, sir?" Henry hesitated. "Is there a reason?" "Standard check," Miles replied smoothly. "You match a vague description. Older black male. Older car." Henry drew in a breath, long, deep, pulling calm from the rustling trees around him. "I'm not casing anything," he said. "I'm a guest here." But Miles was already opening the door. Henry stepped out, slow and calm. No sharp moves. No raised voice. Just that familiar, quiet exhaustion of someone who'd been through this before. "Turn around. Hands on the hood." "Is that really necessary?" Henry asked, still even. "You don't get to decide that," Miles snapped. Grady moved behind him, patting him down with exaggerated force. The Buick's engine ticked as it cooled, and in the front seat, the gift-wrapped tea set sat untouched, still waiting. "You carrying anything illegal, sir?" Grady asked. "Just breath," Henry murmured. No one heard. Or they chose not to. When they found nothing, no apology followed. No explanation. Just a curt order to sit on the curb while they sorted things out. Henry sat. He didn't protest. Didn't plead. He simply stared into the sunset behind the trees, wondering if his daughter had started to worry. If Ava had asked where Grandpa was. Grady chuckled at something Miles whispered. Then he turned back to Henry. "You know," he said, "you might think you're just some harmless old man, but some of y'all know how to blend in real slick. We don't take chances." Henry looked up, not with rage, not with fear. Just the hollow stillness of someone quietly erased. Not one of them had asked his name. Not one of them knew. Not one of them cared. He didn't resist. Didn't flinch. But Grady saw the silence and mistook it for defiance. "You think this is a game, old man?" he snapped, stalking around the Buick like a predator. "Driving this junk heap through this neighborhood like you belong here?" Henry's voice remained steady, deliberate. "I told you, I'm visiting my daughter. Today is my granddaughter's birthday." Grady scoffed, leaned through the open passenger window, and snatched the small, blue-wrapped box resting on the seat. "What's this?" he barked, shaking it as though it might explode. "Please," Henry said quietly, a hint of pleading in his tone. "That's for my granddaughter. It's fragile." But Grady didn't care. He flipped the box in his hands, tore at the ribbon with mockery, and shredded the paper in 2 swift rips. Inside, a miniature porcelain tea set, delicate little cups and saucers, trimmed with faded pink roses, nestled in soft tissue. Miles leaned in to look, smirking. "What? Planning to break into a house and throw a tea party?" he laughed. Henry opened his mouth, but no words came out. Then Grady let it happen. Whether out of spite or pure carelessness, he let the box fall. It hit the pavement with a hollow crack. One of the cups split in half. Clean, irreversible. "Oops," Grady muttered, not even pretending to mean it. "Guess that ain't street legal either." Henry knelt down slowly, his knees stiff, hands trembling. He began gathering the broken porcelain like it was more than just glass. Like it was something sacred. His pride. His patience. His place in the world. "You didn't have to do that," he said softly. Miles turned away like he hadn't heard. Grady said nothing at all. There were no fists. No screams. No blood. Just the quiet violence of being diminished in broad daylight. The kind of cruelty that leaves no scars, just the lingering ache of knowing you were never truly seen. Never really counted. The ride to the station was silent, save for the occasional crackle of the police radio and the distant hum of tires on asphalt. Henry Carter sat in the back seat, not cuffed, but still caged. His hands rested gently in his lap, posture upright, back straight, as if to remind the world that dignity is not granted. It's kept. And he kept his. He didn't speak. Didn't argue. He just stared ahead, eyes steady, revealing nothing of the storm behind them. There was a weight in Henry's chest, thick and silent. Grady and Miles didn't say much. They didn't have to. The arrest, in their minds, was already justified. Not by any statute they could quote, but by something older, darker. A silent code. Unspoken. Dangerous. Grady had called ahead. Reported a possible vagrant, exhibiting suspicious behavior in a residential area. There was no mention of identification. No mention that Henry was a retired schoolteacher. No mention of the birthday gift sitting shattered in the street. Just suspicion. And that was enough. At the station, they brought him in through the back entrance. Not booked. Not formally charged. Just processed. Enough to make a point. You don't belong, unless someone with power says you do. They sat him in a hard plastic chair near intake. A few officers glanced at him. No one asked his name. No one asked if he was all right. At the front desk, Grady leaned in with practiced arrogance, recounting his version of the stop. Didn't answer questions clearly, he said, flipping through a clipboard like it bored him. Said he was visiting someone we couldn't verify. Did he resist? The intake officer asked, barely looking up. Grady shrugged. Not exactly. But he wasn't cooperative. Uncooperative. They used the word like a lever. To tip the scales. To conjure guilt from thin air. Henry said nothing. The chair creaked beneath him, but he didn't move. He wasn't waiting for mercy. Or justice. He was waiting for truth. Because truth always arrived, eventually. And then it did. The door at the far end of the hall opened with calm authority. The station, moments ago indifferent, now held its breath. The sound of polished boots echoed down the corridor, sharp, certain. The intake officer looked up, his face tightening. Grady straightened. Miles removed his sunglasses, without thinking. Then she stepped in. Chief Alicia Carter. Her navy uniform crisp. Her gold badge catching the light. She didn't rush. She didn't speak. But her silence hit like a thunderclap. She scanned the room once. Once was enough. Then her eyes found the man sitting in the corner. Her father. Her voice came low, but precise, sharp as a blade. Where is the officer who brought Mr. Henry Carter in? Grady stood quickly, spine stiff like it might hold back the fear rising behind his eyes. Chief, ma'am, we got a report about a suspicious vehicle. Older model. No visible tags. We followed protocol. Protocol? Alicia cut in, her voice level but laced with steel. She stepped forward, each word deliberate, each syllable a strike. You stopped a 70-year-old man without cause. You offered no explanation. You brought him in like a criminal, without a charge. You ripped open his belongings. You destroyed his granddaughter's birthday gift. Miles shifted, muttering, "That's not exactly what happened," arms folding defensively. Alicia turned to him, eyes sharp. "Would you like me to roll the footage? I already pulled the body cam files, or what little of them were recording. It cuts in after the stop." "That's a policy violation in itself." Grady stepped forward, chest puffed, trying to reclaim control. "With all due respect, Chief, we didn't know who he was. He wouldn't cooperate. It shouldn't take knowing someone's identity to treat them like a human being," Alicia snapped. Her stare was piercing now. "But since it matters so much to you, he was someone. Someone you humiliated. Someone you handled like a suspect. Someone whose only crime was being old, black, and visible in a place you decided he didn't belong." Miles stiffened. "Look, we had every reason to be cautious," he insisted. "That kind of car in that kind of neighborhood." "That kind of neighborhood is my neighborhood," Alicia said, stepping so close their breath mingled. "And that man is Henry Carter, my father. A decorated veteran. A retired educator. A grandfather who brings porcelain tea sets to birthday parties. And none of those things would have mattered to you, would they?" Grady's voice spiked with heat, defensive now. "We didn't mistreat him. We followed protocol. He gave us attitude." "You shattered his gift," Alicia said coldly. "You mocked him. You handled him like a threat. You dragged him into my department like he was disposable. And now you want to hide behind procedure." "This is an overreaction," Miles snapped. "We've brought people in for less. We've stopped people on suspicion before. No one's ever made this a thing," Grady barked, indignation replacing his fear. "That ends now," Alicia said. Her voice didn't rise to shout. It rose to end. "Not just because the man you tried to break was her father, but because for every man before him who didn't have a daughter in uniform, there was silence. No recourse. No witness. No justice." "I'm speaking for them too," she said. Then she turned, sharp and certain, to the desk sergeant. "Effective immediately, Officers Grady and Miles are suspended, pending full investigation. I want their stop history reviewed. Notify professional standards. This is going to civilian oversight." Grady's voice cracked. "You're ruining our careers over this?" "No," Alicia replied, stepping back like she was closing a door. "You already did that. I'm just making it official." She repeated it, cool and final, suspended. Immediately. Still, neither officer moved. The moment hung, stretched and brittle. Then she turned to Henry. Her voice softened. "Just a thread, just for him. Come on, Daddy. Let's go." Henry rose without rush, his back straight, his hands calm. He didn't need to speak. His dignity spoke for him. He walked beside her, not just a man wronged, not just a retired teacher or a grandfather, but a man walking out, not away.
"And Alicia?"
She didn't look back. Not once. Not until the door shut behind them, sealing the station behind glass and steel and silence. Justice, real justice, was waiting outside. The evening air had cooled, draped in dusk. The sky had become watercolor, burnt orange bleeding into indigo. Father and daughter walked in step, the quiet between them full. Not uncomfortable, just full, of everything said, unsaid, and understood. At her cruiser, Alicia opened the passenger side. Henry lowered himself into the seat with slow effort, his body aching but his soul intact. Only once he was settled, hands folded like always, did she speak. "They're off the force," she said quietly. "Effective immediately. I made the call before I even left that building." Henry turned toward her, expression calm, but his silence echoed something deeper. Alicia added, crisp as glass. "Grady's badge is gone. He's already under internal investigation for unlawful detainment and conduct unbecoming," Alicia finished, eyes still on the road. "The Civilian Review Board takes it from here. I expect they'll recommend permanent decertification. He won't wear a badge again." Henry nodded, slow. "And the other one?" "Miles resigned," she said, her voice flat as she started the engine. "Thought stepping down would protect him. It won't. I already filed the misconduct report with Post. His resignation won't erase what happened. That paper trail follows him everywhere. And I'll make sure no department in the state touches his application. Henry let out a quiet breath. Good, he said simply. But after a moment, his voice softened with knowing. This didn't start with them. No, Alicia agreed, pulling out onto the road, headlights slicing through dusk. It starts with what taught them to see you as a threat. The silence. The culture. The reflex. The drive was short, less than 10 minutes, but it stretched like memory, each streetlight blinking by like old snapshots, places Henry had passed through for decades, but never truly passed into. He looked out the window, watching familiar corners blur past, some new, some unchanged. Some he'd helped build, once upon a time. None had been built with men like him in mind. Then they turned the final corner. Alicia's block came into view, her house glowing soft and golden like a lighthouse calling someone home. Tiny porch lights curled around the rails. A paper banner flapped gently above the front door. Happy birthday, Ava. Through the living room window, Henry saw her, twirling in a pink dress, practicing her curtsy in the glass, smiling at herself. Alicia pulled into the driveway and cut the engine, but didn't move right away. I'm rewriting the entire civilian engagement policy, she said finally. Her voice had changed, not angry, not tired. Resolved. It goes into effect next month. Every officer retrained. Every stop logged. And any incident like today, immediate suspension. No appeals. Henry turned to her, his eyes full but steady. Good, he said again. They stepped out of the car together. Ava saw them first. Grandpa, she squealed, sprinting barefoot down the walk. Henry's face bloomed into a smile, real and full and wide. He knelt, arms open. She flew into him, and he caught her like something sacred. And in that moment, the weight of the day, the silence, the doubt, the ache, began to lift. Inside, laughter spilled from the kitchen. Marcus handed him a slice of cake, clapping him gently on the shoulder. Alicia stood by the window a beat longer, watching them. Her father home, her family whole. But the work, the real work, was just beginning. 3 weeks later, under the crisp clarity of a morning sky, Chief Alicia Carter stood at the podium in City Hall. City officials and community leaders flanked her, and the cameras flashed like the first sparks of something that could burn. Reporters filled the air with questions, some sharp, some skeptical, but she remained steady, every word deliberate as she unveiled the Carter Protocol, a sweeping reform of the department's procedures for civilian interactions, designed not just to address the failures of the past, but to prevent them from ever repeating again. Immediate supervisor notification for all stops involving seniors or minors, she began, her voice strong. Mandatory quarterly bias and de-escalation training for every officer. Full body cam activation before any contact, or the stop will be deemed invalid. A new oversight committee with civilian involvement to review patterns of misconduct. The room held its breath. A reporter pushed, testing her resolve. Is naming the policy after your father personal? Alicia looked straight into the camera, unblinking, and answered without hesitation. It's not personal. It's necessary. Because too often, men like my father are made invisible. Questioned. Dismissed. This policy is our promise that silence is no longer an option. And if any officer can't uphold that promise, they don't belong here. That evening, Henry sat quietly on Alicia's porch, a cup of hot tea warming his hands. Ava curled next to him, already drifting into sleep, while the porcelain tea set, broken and whole, sat on the table between them. One cup was missing, the rest filled with the quiet echo of imagination. For the first time in a long while, Henry Carter didn't feel the need to be anything other than exactly who he was, seen, heard, and, at last, protected by a system that had once forgotten him.